2nd, which, reading the caption here, is a presentation of the Finance Department budget overview for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, Mayor and Council and Bellaire residents and everyone participating. So tonight, I'll be the first to kind of introduce the Finance Department from the perspective of the budget for fiscal 2022. Next slide. So the first slide is going to be the why for the Finance Department. So I'm going to read this quickly and not all of it. The Finance Department is responsible for ensuring the integrity of the city's finances through accurate planning and recording of financial transactions. The Finance Department provides stewardship of the city's finances through finance administration and accounting. Skip that little section, you can read that for yourself. But the Finance Department manages utility billing, which bills and collects revenues for the water, wastewater, and solid waste usage function. And that's the main source of revenue for the enterprise fund. And then the third thing that the Finance Department is responsible for, we oversee the municipal court for the jurisdiction of Class C misdemeanors, and we ensure fair and equal adjudication of all cases. So the most important thing we take away from finance is stewardship and compliance. Next slide. So who the department serves. So the department serves all of the departments here at the city. We are in what you classify as an internal service fund department, finance, information technology, and human resources. We're all internal service fund departments. So I serve those departments as well. We serve city council as we're tonight, boards, commissions. We have my audit finance board that I work closely with. So very available for them. And then don't work much with commissions, but through the other departments in their work, we're still a byproduct of them also. As far as some of our affiliated partners and contractors, we serve them. We have our auditors. We work with FEMA, the Texas Department of Emergency Management. I have financial advisors, U.S. Capital Advisors, work with them, and Harris County Appraisal District and the Assessor's Office. The department serves Bellaire residents. As I stated earlier, we handle the utility billing function. So we bill for water, wastewater, and solid waste, and we have Bellaire residents that come up to make payments on a regular basis, so we serve them. And then we take care of the court participants over there in the courts PD building, dealing with misdemeanor offenses, traffic violations, and ordinance violations, dealing with homes and things of that nature. Next slide. So what the Finance Department does, we're going to break this down into 4 main functional areas, and then I'll go over a little more in detail on the next slide. Finance is broken down into administration, accounting, utility billing, and municipal court. The next slide will go into some detail. So under what the department does for administration, we have budget. So we adopt the budget, and the budget, again, it starts and it just seems like it never ends. It's an all-year process. Once you adopt the budget, you're back to monitoring. Financial reporting, that's where we produce our CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And we also do our quarterly reporting and our monthly reporting out of that area. Investments, we have about a $36 million investment portfolio that the city manages, so we take care of that. We just talked about debt. One of the things we look at the city of Bellaire, we've issued quite a bit of debt over the last few years, but we also look at those opportunities to refund debt to reduce some of those interest costs to take some of that burden off of our Bellaire residents. And then last, we have our risk management function where we handle the risk management responsibilities for the city, handle our auto liability coverages, our errors and omission, general liability. So we have certain categories that fall under that area of responsibility in the Finance Department. Another next area of emphasis would be our accounting area. So that's where we have our purchasing function here at the City of Bellaire. We have one purchasing person that handles multiple functions. And say for last fiscal year, 2019, for example, we processed about 2,600 purchase orders, roughly about 217 a month or 50 a week. So very busy function here for the City of Bellaire. We issue a lot of purchase orders. Accounts payable is another function here. We pay the bills, cut the checks. We cut about 3,500 checks in 2019, so about 300 a month, or I would say 68 a week. So again, very active over there in the area of accounts payable. We have general ledger. That's where we take care of our records, making sure our general ledger account numbers are accurate and maintained. And then the other areas are capital assets. So that's where we maintain our fleet, our buildings, our infrastructure, making sure that our capital assets are appropriately recognized on our financial system records. Our next area of responsibility is utility billing. So within utility billing, we bill for the residents for the utility accounts. We have 6,496 accounts as of today. About 6,200 are active, so about 200 or so are inactive, or commercial, I'm sorry. We have residential and commercial customers, sorry about that, to get us to about 6,500. We bill about $9.5 million. So we bill quite a bit. And if we look at that for every single account of the 6,500, it averages about $123. But again, that has to take into consideration we're including residential versus commercial, because again, it's just hard to estimate the differences, but it averages about 122 per month. And then we have our municipal court where we take care of our warrants. We have some magistrates and payments that take place. We have jury trials. We have judge trials. So very busy role in the municipal court area. But as we all know with COVID, it's kind of been a little bit tempered and died down. So we'll see how things go as the state and others reopen. Next slide. So this tells you a little bit about who is in the department. So it is 11 of us full-time in the department. Myself, we have an assistant director, Jim Harrison, court clerk, Belinda, Todd Gross. We have Leslie, Sergio in our courts, and Sergio's actually filling in for us over here in accounts payable. And then we have Bonnie and Kim in our utility billing. Been here for quite a bit of time, so very pleased with the utility billing function and all that they accomplish over there. Then we have Christine, who's our senior management analyst, and then Subin, who does, he's our senior accountant. So we are, I would say, a small city, but I've worked at other cities, and I will say that for a small city, these individuals do a lot of work, just like all the employees here in the city. We're a small city, you just have to wear a lot of hats. And so I'm very fortunate that here in the finance department, no one is scared to put on multiple hats, I would say. So next slide. Okay, here, I wanted to look at some of the numbers because again, we'll talk about, this is the budget. So we'll look at kind of what our adopted budget is for the 21 and then go into some of our historical years. For example, if you're looking at say fiscal year 2019, what I like to kind of highlight is we had an adopted budget, say about $1.7 million. We actually spent 1.6, and I can tell you exactly why we came in under budget. We had some vacancies during that year, and then we had some savings with regards to our judges and our courts contract. So that's for fiscal 19 why it came in under budget. Let's look at fiscal 20. Fiscal 20, we had an adopted budget of $1.769 million. We spent about 1.674, so we came in under budget. In those areas, we came in about 94,000 under, and the judges and prosecutors, as we all know, as a result of COVID, court was not held. So we did experience less expenditures in that area. And then we also did not spend the $31,000 for the fee study from fiscal 20 because council approved for me to carry it over to 21. So that's kind of some of the underages for fiscal 20. So our budget for 21 is 1.8 million. We're still in the middle of the fiscal year, so we'll see how this year unfolds as we continue to finish the year out. Next slide. And here we'll do the same thing with the enterprise fund. Going back to prior years, 2019 had a budget of about $327,000. And again, for this piece of the enterprise fund, this is just for the utility billing side. The remainder of the public works enterprise fund is handled by Public Works, and that'll be covered at a later time. So here we spent a little bit under about 28,000 in fiscal 19, and that was mainly due to a switch in our automated reading contract because we were switching over to the AMI meters, so we had savings there. And then in fiscal 20, we came in actually over budget in fiscal 20, and doing the research, it turns out that as a result of the credit card fees in fiscal 20, we actually came in over budget in the enterprise fund. So that was adjusted and addressed in the fiscal 21 budget. So we should be fine as 21 unfolds. Next slide.
Terrence, pardon me.
Yes.
Just to point out,
sure.
We talked about earlier those improvements and kind of those guaranteed savings relative to the performance contracting project. One of those that you'll see is, as Terrence pointed out, the change in the meter reading over the years. And I think that was certainly one of the things that was anticipated. Am I correct in that, Terrence?
And sir, you know what? I do remember that in the contract, but you're right. Yes, definitely.
I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Brent. Okay. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So the next slide, we're going to talk briefly about performance indicators, and they were introduced to the city of Bellaire last year, maybe the year before, but we are enhancing them this year. They're going to be the performance indicators that are set and promulgated by the International City Managers Association, so ICMA. So for the finance department, we're going to have two that we'll report on. One is the pertaining to accounts payable, basically looking at the city's responsibility to make our payments within 30 days, because that's a state statute that the city should follow the Prompt Payment Act. So that's one of the measurements that ICMA is recommending for the finance department. And then the other performance indicator we're going to look at the procurement. So we're going to look at all of the purchases for the city of Bellaire, and we're going to try to procure using our P cards, our credit cards. So it's another measurement that entities are looking at. I'm assuming it's to see how efficient you are and how you are utilizing your resources within your appropriate jurisdiction. So next slide. So the next slide, and what several departments will talk about possible management projects for next year. And for us, we have two. And one of them, I've been talking about this project for probably, I've been here 5 years, so I would say 5 years. But, and I know Councilmember Wesley has asked me about this before when I first met him about a year ago. But we are currently on version 9, the City of Bellaire, version 9 of an Enco product by Tyler Technology. We've been on this platform about 15 years or more. That being said, it's just outdated. So we were on a wait list for about 12 to 16 months, and we are finally put in the queue to be able to upgrade. So we'll be talking about that more and more as time moves on. But one of the things I would like to highlight about the version 9 to version 10 is it's a customizable type system that'll provide dashboards for our departments. So it'll be very user friendly for our departments. It'll be better search filter capabilities for running reports, queuing reports. For right now, if I want to look at all the overtime, say for the City of Bellaire, I have to do it manually. But with a version 10, I would be able to pull down my object account 115, and it would just give me the total for the city in just one button. So those are some of the advantages. We're going to be able to have what we call workflow. Right now, if a department wants to pay an invoice, they have to literally send me the invoice via email or drop it off, and we enter it manually. Whereas if we have workflow, it will be scanned from the point of the department. It'll just go through the system. It's automatically archived. It's there for my auditors. It's there for anyone. So the auditors, when they come in and they sit down to do the audit for the City of Bellaire, I can just sit them at a computer and give them full access. Viewing rights only, no changing rights. But those are so many huge benefits to us moving to version 10. And the one thing that we did do to pretty much cement that this was a good option for the City of Bellaire is we participated in a user group with the City of Friendswood and Katy and other cities that are on version 10, just to hear the positive feedback and to kind of see what the system looks like. And I was there when they pushed a button and it generated a budget report. Now, I don't know if it would be to our satisfaction because it's not our system, but it did show me what it could look like. So again, very excited about this project, and we'll keep you informed, council, as I get more information. The other management project we're going to consider, as I mentioned a moment ago, is our winter sewer average, and it was more prominent this year than ever with the winter freeze we had. We had several residents that through this winter leak program, it was obvious the month of November is a very unique month where, you know, residents are really still watering their yards. So we're going to look at or recommend looking at this as a project to maybe, again, assess the true cost of what it takes to treat the water that's going into our wastewater treatment plant. And that's the objective of the winter sewer average. So we feel pretty confident we want to spend some time on this to make sure it's really reflective of what Bellaire residents should be paying for their wastewater cost. Next slide, okay. And so here, this is going to be a slide for items to consider. So again, each department will bring budget considerations specific to their area, and it may be some even general to the city. So for finance, implementation of the cost allocation plan and fee study. As we all know, the fee study is in the final stages of being completed and wrapped up. Don't really know what the results are yet, but that will be part of the discussion. And as a result of that, it may take us to implement some of these recommendations in fiscal 22 or thereafter, or we could even implement some of them in the current fiscal year 21 if we feel comfortable. And again, we can discuss that. That's a policy decision. Another thing we want to look at, as I mentioned, the winter sewer average. And after seeing how successful this fee study seems to be coming along and pretty much being satisfied, we wanted to look at potentially a utility rate study for the water sewer rate. Solid waste hasn't been touched in quite a while. I think the city did embark upon a study back in 2016, so we're about 5 years away, and I do recommend these type of studies every 5 years. So we'll want to look at that as a consideration for next year. And then as we talk about the upgrade of Encode to version 10 from version 9, there's very nice budget software that we may want to look at again to complement the upgrade from version 9 to version 10. Several entities that we reached out to are using this enhancement as far as their budget presentations. So we're just, again, going to want to look at it and if council's in agreement with it, maybe consider it. But for right now, it's just something that the Finance and Courts Division that we're considering for next year. Next slide. So this pretty much wraps up the first inaugural department presentation for fiscal 22, finance, courts. And that being said, I will open it up for any questions or any thoughts that you would like to share.
Thank you, Terrence. As our guinea pig put in the position of having to go first, I'd say you set a high bar for your fellow department directors. So not bad. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, sir.
Feedback, questions for Terrence on his departmental presentation? Councilmember Lewis.
Yes, on your winter sewer rate averaging, when you are doing that, are you looking for, I'm thinking of the sanitary sewers rather than storm sewers.
Yes, sanitary sewers, yes.
And I'm thinking that November is probably a better month than March because you really don't need to count the outdoor water usage for watering the spring plantings, for instance, in March, or the swimming pool. You know, people getting their swimming pools ready in the springtime, whereas November is less likely to be there is some planting that goes on in November. I do some of that. Less likely to be swimming pool maintenance time and things like that. I really don't think that's a good idea. I would stick with November.
Okay. Yeah, it is just definitely from some of the feedback from the residents, we thought it was definitely something we would just, again, talk about and just study it just to make sure. Because when we looked at some of our consumption information from November, say December, January, February, March. The oddity is that December, January, and February were actually the lower months, and March was even lower than November. We went back like 5 years. But again, we just started to look at it because it was brought to our attention by a few residents when we were going through some of the winter leak stuff. So, Councilmember Lewis, we'll just research, look into it just to see the pros and the cons, and then if it's accepted as a management project, we can make a decision at that time. But definitely duly noted, I'll take into consideration some of the thoughts you just mentioned, because that's something we definitely want to think about, which is why we wanted to do it as like a project to get some competing thoughts from others that could help us uncover what direction we would like to go in. So thank you.
This is Jim Hotze.
Yes, sir.
What type of cost are you talking about to go from version 9 to version 10?
That's what we're kind of working on right now. But what I will tell you as Councilmember Hotze, when I started here in 2016, there was quite a bit of money that was potentially set aside for an upgrade. And I remember specifically at the time, IT Director Larry Parks had given me an estimate, and that was about $160,000. It was a very large number. And the reality is we're nowhere near that number, Councilmember Hotze. We had set aside $100,000. And so that's kind of what we set aside for this item. The final amounts we have to negotiate, because we're going to have to look at some of the software packages that we are trying to acquire, but we also have to look at what type of data and how much data we would like to move into the new system. Because my personal opinion is, council member and others, I don't think we should buy a new system and just put the exact same stuff in it, as I would say. I want to clean it up, purge some things, clean up some records. That's the great opportunity of having a system conversion. It's your one. It's like spring cleaning every 10 years. And so I kind of want to take advantage of that. And that kind of is what then dictates our possible cost. But the objective is always to keep the cost as minimal as possible. But I do strongly recommend, and I think it's time for the city of Bellaire to consider this. So very excited about it.
And let me also add to that, when we talked about the technology plan last year, the upgrade was one of the things that was kind of forecasted out in those numbers that we presented last year.
Thank you.
Are there any other competitors that have software that for municipalities?
Yes, there are quite a few, Councilmember Hotze, but I will say this, quite a few Texas cities use Tyler Technologies. So several of us have Encode, several of us have Munis, several of us have, there's several type of software packages that Tyler provides. So a lot of Texas cities do use Tyler products. I'm actually from California, and small world is we actually used Encode in California at one of the cities I worked at. So it even branched out to the southern states, but it's very prevalent here in Texas. They have, the office is located in Texas, Tyler, Texas. So,
Not a
but
bad place.
I'm sorry.
No, Tyler's a very fine place.
Yes, yeah. But what we will do is there's so many advantages to staying with Encode since we already have the version 9. We're very familiar with their customer service. We're very familiar with a lot of things. We can look at other potentials, but it would be starting from scratch. I don't think our costs will be that favorable. I feel like we're going to get a good deal because we're already in partnership with them. But we can get a feel generally for a few others if you would like us to. I have no problem with that also.
No, anybody spending $150,000 or $100,000 would look at other options to be sure they're not being taken advantage of.
Sure. Well,
if I was looking for a new general ledger package for my company, and I was having to pay $100,000 to get an upgrade, I'd sure go out and be sure that was the going price. Sure.
Right. Yes. Well, I'll see what type of information I can pull together, Councilmember Hotze. One thing I do remember back in 2016, the previous director, they did have a few demos, but I don't remember the vendors because it was right before I started working for the city. So, but I'll research a little bit further because we are going to be bringing this back to have conversations with council about this. So this is perfect for me to prepare for that meeting when it occurs. So I'll look into that.
Councilmember Wesley.
Just a few, I think, hopefully easy questions. On the risk management, is most of that insurance through TML, or is there a variety of policies?
No, it's all through TML.
So is that, I mean, I'm just curious how that, so is there any evaluation TML versus someone else, or is that pretty much, because we're a municipality, we have to use TML?
I wouldn't say we have to use TML, but by the economies of scale and the fact that TML is a very prevalent provider of these type of insurances, we, joining these pools and things of that nature, you get certain benefits. I do recall about 3 years ago, there was a company that reached out to the city of Bellaire. That was when Diane White and Paul Hoffman was here, and it was, I just remember it wasn't beneficial for the city at that time, and partly, again, is because of TML and the fact that they represent almost all of the Texas cities, and so there's a strong benefit to staying as part of their team. What I do know, too, is each year when I look at a lot of our premium increases, I remember in California, I saw larger increases annually. I feel like ours are pretty reasonable. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, but a few years ago, they were very minimal. Last year, they went up a little bit more than the prior year, but it also depends on how many accidents we're having and things of that nature. But our rates are pretty constant, pretty good.
You at one point had mentioned you have a lockbox for payments that come into the city.
Yes.
And is that, so if somebody drops a payment off, is that also sent to the lockbox, or do you process those individually?
We process, they can drop it off, and then we pick them up and we process them individually inside.
So out of the 6,500 utility payments, approximately how many are actually processed individually?
Okay. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I'm making a note and I'll get that to you.
Well, no, that's fair. I guess my question would be, is there when we're looking at costs, is there a way to, I mean, I would assume that the process to input everybody who goes through the lockbox is much, much more efficient, or everybody who pays with direct deposit is much, much more efficient. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have human intervention, you run the potential for error. So, yes, I would agree with that statement.
How do you, so, I mean, I can see over time that would become more efficient, but I'm assuming you also process all of the payments that are made for parks, for all of the rec teams and all of that?
Yes, yes.
So is there, and so when you're looking at costs, or I guess my question would be, obviously, well, maybe not, seems obvious to me you're not doing that on an individualized basis. How do you do that by what, sport, or how do you keep track of that accounting wise?
Well, we have our banking fees that we pay every month. So we can look at costs from that perspective. It also depends on, I mean, it kind of fluctuates each month depending on the number of checks, the number of transfers, ACHs. But there is a way for us to look at cost. I don't know how granular I'm able to get the level of detail, but I can definitely provide some type of comparative analysis to look at, residents that are paying first credit card and first paying in person, see what I can find out. I can definitely look into that.
Well, my question is a little bit more simple than that. My question is basically, you're not tracking each individual what they're paying for rec sports. You're tracking it, for example, by sport or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not really, yeah. It's more tracked in batch totals. So as you collect payments for the day, John may pay by check, Mark may pay by cash, but at the end of the day, it becomes one batch. And then we pick that batch up from parks, and then it, or it goes to the bank and it's put into our bank accounts and our coffers that way.
And I guess my point is you know, this might be something also to look at. How could, you know, if it's more efficient to, for example, use credit cards or debit cards, and maybe we
Yes.
could, you know, policy that's what we do.
Yeah,
I-
and some of that's, and some of it will be discussed. I know we talked about credit card fees. I don't have the study in front, but that's something I hope to discuss as we discuss the fee study, because we got to look at credit card fees and how do we either pass those on, absorb them. So we'll have to have those discussions. And again, that's another policy decision that council will have to make.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further, council? By way of feedback or questions for Terrence? All right, well, thank you again, Terrence. That does conclude this presentation. And next on the workshop agenda is a general budget process discussion that I'm going to add to the end of that, if any. Brandon, I'm not sure if staff's intent with this item D, was it just an opportunity for further discussion, if any?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And, you know, once again, as I mentioned, you know, if there's a particular question that we need to take down now, that's fine. I would certainly encourage everyone to take advantage of the email option that we can then take back and take some time to research and then come back to you all with the answers. So we'll be monitoring that email box going forward.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Berman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Brad, with respect to the process then, I noted in your presentation that you're looking for feedback from council with respect to debt policy. And within the process, you know, would it be most fruitful for you guys for us to have that sort of policy discussion?
Well, depending on the subject, I mean, I would say if you have a question or if there are any thoughts, you know, send them, you know, as soon as possible.
Sure. I'm looking for a little broader, right? Because you said you're looking for consensus from council, right? So that requires all of us to sort of be part of it. So me sending you a question doesn't necessarily get us there. You know, whether it's a pay down plan, whether it's a, you know, longer plan with respect to, you know, capital infrastructure projects. But what's your thought, at least from a process perspective, you know, when should we be prepared to sort of have that, you know, workshop? Is that something that we do at, when we do our first sort of workshop for the budget?
That would ideally be the time to do that. We're not limited to that, obviously, and
right.
We can certainly modify the schedule, but yes, and what we want to do now is we want to make sure that we're gathering the information, you know, preparing for questions, that sort of thing, to where when we actually prepare and present the proposed budget, you know, we have these policy options already in mind, and we research them, and yes, council, if this is what you'd like to do, here's how we would propose to do that. So looking at quite a few, you know, different potential scenarios for some of those questions, you know, we're already working on. You know, mentioned the whole personnel issue or compensation question. You know, we're gathering that information from those different salary studies, populating a spreadsheet that will calculate where we fall in terms of the minimum of our range, the maximum of our range, the actual or the average, depending on if we have more than one employee in that classification. So we'll have plenty of data to be able to present to council so that council can have the best information to provide that direction.
Great.
But I would encourage any questions, you know, send those in as soon as possible.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any further general discussion? Seeing none, thank you. That does conclude this workshop, which is adjourned at 7:24.